Hello. In this screencast, I'm going to show data binding problem and workaround for this problem for Windows Phone application design in Visual Studio 2010. This particular problem occurs with x64 applications design. Let me briefly describe the data binding and the problem I'm going to show with an example. A basic Windows Phone application, which is supposed to be used for data binding, contains a form and a data item class, which represents some data. This data may be represented by several properties. Form contains binding source control, which is linked to data item class. And on the other hand, binding source control is linked to data grid view control to represent data in the form. Binding source control may be connected to any other control to represent data on the form. Unfortunately, if this application project is x64, we have a problem with this link because, unfortunately, Visual Studio during design time cannot discover types from x64 application, which is our application, and our data item class cannot be defined by Visual Studio. A very short application example will show this data binding and this described problem. Let's create a new application project of a Windows Phone application and create a basic data item class, which contains just two basic properties, accessible for both for getter and setter, an ID and a name. Both properties should be public. Now let's rebuild our solution. And we are able now to create a new data source with Visual Studio Designer from data object with our data item class defined previously. Now we are able to just drag and drop this created data source to our form, and the rest will be created by Visual Studio. Now we are able to just start on our application and to see what data bounded application is working correctly. But now let's change one particular basic property of our application. Let's change platform target from x86 to x64. And let's get back to our form designer and just rebuild our solution again. And now we see what Visual Studio Designer no longer works correctly. And now let's see how to work around this basic problem. The workaround for the problem is quite simple. We have to create a new class library with a target for any CPU and move our data item class to this class library. And also we have to recreate this link to our data bounded application. But we have to be careful because this class library cannot be x86 application. This x86 application of the class library will be linked in Visual Studio 2010 Designer correctly, but the created application will not be acceptable to work because x64 application will not be able to connect to data item class in x86 application class library. Well, let's try this workaround with our example. Let's just ignore our problem with the designer of Visual Studio and just remove our data bounding. Now let's create a new class library. And create this public class with both properties what we've been used previously in our data item class. Just let's copy paste them. Now let's rebuild our solution and try to do this data source again. Now we can able to create reference to our class library and use this class 1 in our application. Let's just drag and drop again, and now it works correctly again. So the workaround is correctly working. I have to say thanks to Bob Wu for this proposed workaround, and I'm offering everybody to join Microsoft Forums discussion about this particular problem, and thank you very much for your attention.